Of Alice in Wonderland is much darker than one might expect. What is up, Ewoo crew? Today, we are taking a look at the people behind the famous story of Alice in Wonderland, and we'll discuss some of the more uncomfortable and creepy truths behind the author and his inspiration for the book. It may surprise you to find out that there was actually a real girl named Alice, whom the story was based on and written for. In fact, many of the more outrageous characters were based on real things, including the White Rabbit, the Mad Hatter, the Cheshire Cat, the Queen of Hearts, and the Dodo. Yet, despite being a book written for children, the truth behind the real Alice is anything but kid-friendly. If you enjoy true crime, mysteries, and true stories, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Now, follow us down the rabbit hole, and let's get into it. The Adventures of Alice in Wonderland was written under the name Lewis Carroll, but no such person ever existed. Lewis Carroll wasn't a real person, but the pen name for Charles Ludwig Dodgson. Born in 1832 England, Dodgson was one of 11 children. Growing up, he was known to entertain all his siblings with his made-up stories and games. As a young boy, he suffered from dyslexia and a terrible speech impediment that caused him to stutter. The dyslexia made it very difficult for him to read, a surprising disability for someone who later in life would go on to become one of the most famous authors of children's fiction. Despite these struggles, Dodgson pushed himself very hard to work through his disabilities, and he was still able to do very well academically. In fact, the dyslexia likely helped Dodgson excel at math, and he eventually became a mathematician. When he was older, he worked as a tutor before later becoming a teacher at the University of Oxford. He was reportedly a strange young man who grew into a rather awkward and shy adult, but was described by those who knew him as a devout mathematics scholar and pure of heart. Dodgson allegedly stated that he got along best with children, as they were kinder and easier to be around than adults. In fact, throughout his life, he had frequent relationships with children, but recently, these seemingly harmless relationships have been thrown into doubt. Having written creatively often in his youth, Dodgson already boasted great literary accomplishments, such as having his work featured in magazines and national publications. Still, the ever-humorous author was quoted as musing, "I don't think I have yet written anything worthy of real publication, but I do not despair of doing so someday." It seems the multifaceted young man was humble in his writing skill, but had his sights firmly set on furthering his expertise in the discipline. While at Oxford, Dodgson met the Dean of Christ Church, Henry Little, whom he occasionally worked alongside. Dodgson first befriended the dean's son, Harry, who was 9 at the time, when he himself was around 30. During the Victorian era, there was a trend at the time of unmarried young men being seen as uncles of sorts to families. In the uncle role, these young men would be welcomed to dinner and go on trips with the family, like an extended family member, though they were often not related. Dodgson fell into the uncle role with Harry, and he taught him math, and they would often go rowing together. As Dodgson was an avid photographer, the Little family hired him to take pictures of the entire family. It was there that the family's relationship with Dodgson really blossomed. With the parents' blessing, Dodgson would frequently take the little children on outings, such as picnics or boating down near the River Thames. It was on one of those outings, on July 4th in 1862, that Dodgson and another male colleague took the 3 little daughters on a rowing trip. This was not unusual, as he had taken them out on trips a few times before. Yet it was as they rowed down the river that Dodgson noticed the girls seemed particularly bored. He attempted to entertain them with a story, much like the ones he had told his own siblings when he was younger. The story was made up on the spot, inspired by the girls before him and the things around them that they passed on the boat trip. He was most inspired by Dean Little's 10-year-old daughter, a dark-haired girl named Alice, who looked very little like the Alice we imagine in the story today. Born on May 4, 1852, in Westminster, England, Little was the fourth of Henry and Lorena Little's 10 children. In fact, Dodgson had been taken with Alice since they met, and he actually noted in his diary the specific day he met her, on April 25, 1856, 6 years before the fateful boat ride. During that boat ride, Dodgson told the girls the tale that would eventually become the Alice in Wonderland we know today, though it was much shorter. He wrote in his diary, "In a desperate attempt to strike out some new line of fairy lore, I had sent my heroine straight down the rabbit hole to begin with, without the least idea what was to happen afterwards." Hearing the fantastical story, young Alice begged Dodgson to write it down for her, and the next day, he immediately began to write his first draft of the story. After a month of hard work, Dodgson once again took the girls up the river for a boating trip, where he told them his latest version of the story, expanded with new characters and adventures. After receiving their approval, he set about finding other children to read the story as he made changes. It took him about a year as he continued adding to the tale of Alice until finally it had doubled in length since his original draft. Dodgson practiced illustrations for the storybook by sketching real rabbits. He also tried to copy Alice's face from his photographs of her in meticulous detail, but apparently his images were never used because all of his characters always looked too sad. In order to publish the children's book without any ties to his academic career at Oxford, Dodgson invented the pseudonym Lewis Carroll. This moniker was roughly based on his real name, Charles Ludwig. Lewis was the anglicized form of the Latin word for Ludwig, while Carroll was taken from the Latin word Carolus, which was adapted from Charles. In 1864, Dodgson gave Alice Little a handwritten version as a Christmas present. It was titled Alice's Adventures Underground, and he inscribed the first page to say, "In memory of a summer's day." He apparently referred to young Alice as the person without whose infant patronage I might possibly never have written at all. The first version was still shorter than the later one that was published and didn't have any of the characters of the Mad Hatter or the Cheshire Cat, who would be added later. At first, the Littles seemed excited about having a story written that was inspired by their daughter, Alice. And the Dean actually suggested the title to change to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which it would be famously known by. Prior to this, the title had altered from Alice's Hour in Elfland, Alice Among the Fairies, and Alice Among the Goblins. Before it was published, Dodgson and the Littles had some sort of falling out. Right around the time he gave Alice the hand-drawn book, all of the little children were no longer allowed to see him. Beyond being colleagues, the Dean and Dodgson had been close friends, and the Littles trusted Dodgson enough to take their daughters out without them present. But seemingly out of nowhere, they cut off all communication with him. What may have happened between them is something that has been speculated about for years. And many have assumed that Dodgson did something inappropriate to Alice, which resulted in the family cutting off all communication. But there is no evidence of this. Looking back, Dodgson seemed to have a fascination and almost obsession with young Alice. But there is little evidence to say what actually happened between them. Dodgson was known to keep a diary, but the pages where he recorded the day that resulted in the rift have been mysteriously torn from the book and never been found. Because of this, there have been countless assumptions and theories about what those pages may have contained. The only real piece of evidence we have that something untoward may have occurred between Dodgson and Alice is the sudden rift. The Littles, both the parents and children, all stopped seeing him for several months, after which the Dean and his wife, Lorena, slowly started to socialize with him again. But he was never again allowed to see the children, and definitely not allowed to take them out for picnics or boating. It is certainly curious to wonder what Dodgson could have done that would lead the Dean and Lorena to forcefully extricate the man from their children's lives, but maintain a cordial relationship with the bachelor themselves. In his diaries, Dodgson is said to have written frequently about his battle against sin, where he begs God for the strength to resist his sinful desires. Many have assumed that Dodgson was writing about his feelings for Alice, but Alice is actually not mentioned as often in his diary entries, as one may assume. In fact, he never actually names exactly what he means by sin. Some of the rumors circulating about what may have caused the cleft between the family and Dodgson include that he may have proposed marriage to the young Alice. For the Little family, it would have been alarming to have the 30-year-old Dodgson try to marry 11-year-old Alice. It would certainly explain why the Littles pulled away from him, and Alice was never allowed to be alone with him again. There is another theory that casts a better light on Dodgson, and is one that is supported by some historical evidence. In this theory, it is not Alice who Dodgson has fixated on, but rather her mother, Lorena. Lorena was wildly known to be a great beauty, and rumors at the time said that she was secretly in love with one of her husband's colleagues. Could this have been Dodgson? It would certainly explain why the Dean would not want Dodgson anywhere near his family. As well, his diary entries about sin could be interpreted to be his thoughts on adultery and his feelings for Lorena, not Alice. But again, this is only speculation. There is evidence of his relationships with grown women, and so it seems that he did not have a fixation with only young girls, as many believe. As a photographer, Dodgson took many photos of children, and the photos that he took of young Alice are some of the only surviving evidence that hint at Dodgson's creepy obsession with her. The photos show Alice in a state of undress, the strap of her dress off of her shoulder. It's important to remember that in these pictures, she's only 6 years old, but the historical context is also critical. Alice had been intentionally posed as a beggar child in a tattered and dirty dress, a kind of character for her to play, likely requested by her family. Although Dodgson reportedly had a parent present at all his photo sessions, a questionable note that Dodgson wrote to the mother of a different little girl, of only 8 years old at the time, with whom he wanted to set up a photo shoot, revealed what could possibly be seen as a disturbing fascination. He writes, "It is a chance not to be lost, to get a few good attitudes of Annie's lovely form and face, as by next year she may, though I much hope won't, fancy herself too old to be a daughter of Eve." Perhaps this type of language was normal at the time, for Dodgson seemed entirely unabashed to communicate these thoughts with the girl's own mother. But in today's perspective, these words are definitely concerning. The troubling photographs were taken long before Alice in Wonderland was ever cooked up, and so her parents had seen them and still allowed their daughter to be around Dodgson for years. In fact, the Littles had kept a hand-colored copy of the photo in a case in their house. Therefore, we can probably rule this strange photo shoot out as being responsible for the falling out. As strange and creepy as it may sound to us, it's important to remember that when Dodgson was writing in the mid-18th century, the concept of childhood innocence existed. The Littles likely saw nothing wrong with Dodgson's interest in their daughter, nor the partially dressed photos, because they believed that no one would have inappropriate feelings or inclinations towards a child. It just wasn't something that they could understand. It was not a common concept that the average person would even know occurred. Clearly, though, as soon as they thought their daughter was in some sort of danger, the Littles quickly removed her from the situation. If that is in fact what happened, of course. A year after the mysterious falling out, Alice in Wonderland was finally published. It was met with rave reviews and an adoring public. One of the many reasons it has never... been out of print since its 1865 release date. Besides being inspired by the real Alice, Dodgson also looked to other things around him to create his magical world and absurd characters, including other people, common expressions, and songs. The White Rabbit character was said to be inspired by Dean Little, Alice's father, who was a very busy man at Oxford and was reportedly always in a hurry and checking his pocket watch before he would run off, often arriving late. Besides, he apparently had a small door in his office that was nicknamed the Rabbit Hole. The elusive, grinning, and disappearing Cheshire Cat was apparently based on a few different things. The phrase, "to grin like a Cheshire Cat," was common at the time, which meant to grin broadly and may have originated from inn signs of grinning lions painted in Cheshire. Furthermore, Dodgson himself grew up in a Cheshire village, where he would have encountered the famous Cheshire variety of cheese, often shaped into grinning cats. Other characters include the Queen of Hearts, notorious for her cruelty, short temper, and famous line from the book, "Off with their heads." Though never officially claimed as inspiring the Queen of Hearts, it is commonly believed that the moody and legendarily grumpy-looking Queen Victoria gave him the idea for the cruel and selfish character. The dodo, which only features in the books and earliest movies, was said to be a character Dodgson created after himself, because of his stutter that made him pronounce his own name as Dodo Dodgson. Perhaps the most interesting of characters Dodgson created was the Mad Hatter, who was added to the story before publishing. He is also one of the darker character inspirations. Alice meets the outlandish Mad Hatter at a tea party in the story. As mad as a hatter was another common phrase in the Victorian era. Alluded to a rather tragic true occurrence in history. Hatters, the title for people who made hats, would often use toxic substances, such as mercury, to turn animal fur, usually from rabbit or beavers, into felt for hats. Hatters would often suffer from mercury poisoning from too much exposure to the toxic substance, and it would literally drive them mad. Sufferers would develop mental and physical disorders, such as irritability, distorted vision, mumbled or confused speech, muscle twitches, and tremors that would result in violent, uncontrollable movements called hatter shakes, and other neurological symptoms. Dodgson used mercury poisoning to explain why the Hatter had gone mad, likely made ill by the enormous hat he was often drawn wearing. Many people had theorized that Dodgson had been on something when he wrote Alice in Wonderland. The bizarre characters and world seemed too strange to come from just his imagination, and many think the inspirations had to come from some sort of psychedelic trip. Some believe Dodgson was taking some sort of drugs while writing to influence his eccentric and peculiar story. If he was, it was likely opium, which was very popular and legal at the time. These theories are furthered by the presence of the character of the caterpillar, who is seen in the book smoking a large water pipe and blowing smoke into Alice's face when she nears. Water pipes were frequently used to smoke opium, and the smoke in the story often distorts the reality around Alice. The mushrooms in the story are also magical, and when Alice eats a piece of them, she transforms in size. As well, the bottles marked "Drink Me" and cakes labeled "Eat Me" that have drug connotations and either shrink Alice down or make her grow to the size of a giant. The Jefferson Airplane song from 1967, "White Rabbit," was inspired by these drug-fueled theories. Although it is impossible to know for sure if Dodgson did take any reality-altering drugs, there is really no conclusive evidence. It is entirely possible that the zany author just housed an innate creativity, a skill that wouldn't be all too surprising considering his talent in other avenues like mathematics and photography, and most historians have dismissed these ideas, despite the popularity of the theories. Instead, they have explained that he suffered for most of his life with a terribly painful migraine disorder. Migraines, as many of us know, can cause severe headaches. and some of the sufferers can see auras around people and objects. In Dodgson's case, his migraines were allegedly so bad that he would see strange hallucinations. Not unlike auras, but a little different. Dodgson's particular migraines were actually caused by a rare neurological disorder that would distort his reality. Specifically, it would change the way he perceived the size of things around him, such as his own hands and feet. Sometimes they would appear very large or unnaturally small. Following this train of thought, Alice frequently changes sizes in the story, and this could have been a way for Dodgson to express how his own mind played tricks on him. This strange migraine disorder was officially discovered and categorized in 1955 by a psychiatrist named John Todd, and it has since been known as Todd syndrome. However, it is more commonly called Alice in Wonderland syndrome. After publishing Alice in Wonderland with great success, Dodgson went on to write his sequel. Eerily, several years later, he met another little girl who inspired the second book. And even creepier, she was also named Alice. Was he trying to replace Alice Little? Alice Reiki spoke to Dodgson and talked about her reflection in a mirror. When he asked her to explain how a mirror reversed everything, she guessed that there was perhaps another side of the glass, and another world and version of everyone there. It was this idea that inspired him to write Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There, a sequel set 6 months after the first book. It was sold out for 7 weeks after its publication and was a much darker version of the Wonderland seen in the first book. After writing both books, Dodgson started to separate his personal and professional life from the life of Lewis Carroll. Apparently, whenever letters came in the mail from fans to Oxford, he never replied or even read them, and asked them all to be returned to the sender. It seems that despite his outlandish writing style, through which he created magnificent and energetic worlds, Dodgson himself had been quite the quiet and introverted soul. Charles Dodgson wrote about Alice only one more time in 1871 as a long nonsense poem, The Hunting of the Snark. Because of the wondrous story he had written, Dodgson continued to have friendships with young children and their parents, including 2 of Queen Victoria's own grandchildren. But his life of many ups and downs soon came to a sad end. He became ill in 1898 with pneumonia and died later that year. But what happened to the real Alice? She was actually as big as a celebrity back then, just as famous and well-known as the ones we have today. Everyone knew that she had been the inspiration for the story, and it was no secret that Dodgson, or Carroll, had written them for and about her. Her photographs were everywhere along with the book, so people knew what she looked like and where she lived. She struggled to go anywhere in public without people asking her questions about Alice in Wonderland. Just like Dodgson, Alice grew tired of the attention and the association with Alice in Wonderland. For most of her life, Alice refused to even talk about Alice in Wonderland. And in 1928, she actually sold the illustrated Alice's Adventures Underground book that Dodgson had given her as a gift to an American dealer for £15,400, which is roughly more than $20,000 USD today. The book was later returned to England and is now in the British Museum. It wasn't until she was 80 that Alice started to accept the association with the book, and in 1932 she traveled to New York City with her son and sister in order to attend a Lewis Carroll exhibition and receive an honorary doctorate from Columbia University for awakening with her girlhood's charm the ingenious fancy of a mathematician familiar with imaginary quantities, stirring him to reveal his complete understanding of the heart of a child. 2 years later, Alice died at the age of 82, but her legacy continues to live on. The idea that Dodgson had inappropriate feelings towards Alice has endured to today, even though there is no evidence of this. Many historians have tried to combat it with their own theories, most of which were discussed today. Even stranger, it is reported that Dodgson, in his later years, actually denied repeatedly that any specific little girl was the muse for his famous Alice character. Audiences contested this assertion due to the fact that Alice Little's full name was included in a poem tagged onto the end of Through the Looking Glass. Furthermore, many assert that hidden references are mixed into the Alice books that directly relate the very Alice Little Dodgson knew so well. But Dodgson retorted that it was his common practice to dedicate his acrostic poems to a variety of girls he knew in real life. That Alice Little was no special exception. Those around Dodgson seemed to have differing opinions about the purity of his character. A man named Vladimir Nabokov, who translated Alice into Russian, allegedly complained that Dodgson had a pathetic affinity to the creepy narrative of Nabokov's own novel, Lolita, which follows an adult man who grows very infatuated with a young girl he knows. Some scholars have proposed rather abstract connections between Dodgson's literary works and his possible hidden inclinations as well, such as when writer A.M.E. Goldschmidt presented an essay psychoanalyzing Alice in Wonderland at Oxford. Here, he made the rather bold claim that Alice's fall down the well was, quote, the best known symbol of coitus. Goldschmidt's lack of psychological training has been criticized when he drew this conclusion, and many think that he was merely attempting to parody the unfounded assertions and outdated techniques of old psychologists such as Freud. Still, even with all this swirling suspicion, many who knew Dodgson in real life described him as a kind and moral man. Regardless, because of the lack of evidence, Dodgson would be remembered with both our modern standards and historical context. He was both a gifted writer and mathematician and a shy, awkward man who preferred the company of children to adults. Whether there is more to him, good or bad, we may never know. The same goes for Alice Little, who should be remembered as a clever and imaginative little girl who sparked the creation of an enduring story. We cannot know for sure what caused such a deep rift between Dodgson and the Littles, one that irrevocably fractured their friendship. But what we can say with certainty is that the world of Alice in Wonderland has a history that is darker and more interesting than fiction.
Yet they still want to go in and keep fighting. And the ultimate, now the Commander-in-Chief is continuing to work to bring home troops stationed overseas. Joining me now to discuss that and more is co-author of the book Without Regret, Colonel David Hunt. Colonel, belated Merry Christmas. Good to see you. I think it's been an interesting 4 years. Nobody really knew what to expect with President Donald J. Trump. But I think you, as someone who was in the military for 30 years, how long?
Yeah, Judge, 30 years.
Yeah, you always downplay it. You don't want to talk about your medals. You don't want to talk about anything. I always like to talk about that. But in any event, it seems that Donald Trump is giving a Christmas present to military families in the United States. Explain to the viewers what we're talking about.
This should be shared all over and then go viral. But it won't, simply because of the fact that we are being censored like a motherfucker.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been at war in Afghanistan for 19 years and in Iraq for 17. We've lost thousands of American soldiers, tens of thousands wounded. We've got hundreds of thousands of civilians killed. And the President of the United States has made an absolute right decision to draw down, return soldiers from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria to the U.S., but keep a counterterrorism force to kill terrorists in the region and civilian leaders who caused us so many problems in fighting this war in both Iraq and Afghanistan. It's the right call. Military has been active for 19 years and families. And it's more than time to bring them home and still keep a counterterrorism force in the vicinity. Right decision, way too long. It took 19 years to make this.
Well, the interesting thing is, there was so much criticism of the president. It was every day there was criticism of the president. And yet he was true to his word. He made a promise that he was going to bring the troops home, and he did. He didn't want to occupy. He didn't want to do what a lot of the other presidents wanted to do. And so now with Joe Biden, there appears to be a return of some of the same folks who were in the Obama administration. What do you think that signals to the Pentagon and to the military establishment?
Yeah, facts are stubborn things, not opinions. But during the 8 years of the Obama administration, 40,000 more troops went into Afghanistan. It did not work because of some very bad military leadership. And we attacked, bombed, or had gunfights.
If it wasn't for Donald Trump, you would have never heard nothing about child trafficking. If it wasn't for Donald Trump, you would have never heard nothing about Weinstein.
None of that happened. We rescued people, and we're bringing soldiers home. Period. That's not for me political. That's the facts from the military.
Was given the Nobel Peace Prize, and what Donald Trump did during 4 years, with the peace deal between the UAE and Israel and Bahrain and Serbia, Kosovo, you fought over there. And yet, it's amazing stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of firsts in this administration, the military and politically, of course, like trying to get in contact with North Korea.
Yeah.
I mean, the Obama administration had this issue. Again, 40,000 soldiers they threw into Afghanistan. And that didn't work. And the countries they invaded. The military, by the way, was not... It's always been a great military for these last 19 years. Politically, I don't think the military has been as effective. I think military leadership has been effective. And it should have been, because it's failed in many cases. But we've got a great military
now. Well, how has it been effective?
We also had a great military.
How?
We have some senior officers retired and still in active duty that need to answer for the mistakes they made in Afghanistan and Iraq. And there's books written and studies written. This administration was decentralized, allowing generals to make decisions. Previous administrations have not. But the military, the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, have all still, no matter about the administration, have still been the best fighting force in the world. Period.
Well, and so what about the Defense Authorization Act? What's going on with that latest back and forth with Congress and the bill for the military?
The president's holding up this act, which is a big deal. It's a $900 billion act, because there's words in this bill that allow the military, for example, the Army, to change the names of Confederate names like Fort Hood and Fort Bragg to less controversial names. Problem with that is we've got real serious issues like suicide, like rape, like racism, like bad leadership in the services that will not be touched by what I think is a silly thing to do, changing Fort Hood to Fort Jones. It won't matter. We've got serious stuff to get at, and it's not a serious act to change the name of a post. It is serious to put money against the things like 22 servicemen a day are still committing suicide. Yeah, so that's...
How do you think it's going to end? We have...
And the reason why he committed suicide because they feel that the lies that they're doing is against their morals. It's against their morals.
He has.
So they
Colonel
commit
David Hunt,
suicide
it's
because
always
they
good
can't
to be
handle
with you. Thanks so
some shit that's
much,
against their morals.
and Happy New Year to you. Now, Herschel Walker is next with his reflections on 2020 and whether we should be optimistic about 2021. Stay with us. I'm Justin.
Steve?
Hello and welcome to Justice. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. My opening statement on this Christmas weekend is just moments away. But first, let's get the latest on the investigation into that explosion that shattered the Christmas Day peace and quiet in Nashville. Police have been gathering clues at the home of a person of interest in the attack that left 3 people injured and wreaked havoc on buildings and wireless service in the city. But we're also learning tonight about the heroic Nashville cops who risked their lives to save civilians before the bomb went off. Joining me now with more is Sergeant James Smallwood. He's the president of the Nashville Fraternal Order of Police. Sergeant Smallwood, thanks so much for being with us tonight on Justice.
Absolutely glad to be here. Thanks for having me on, Judge.
Well, first of all, let me congratulate the Nashville Police Department. They were the first responders, as I understand, on Christmas morning when that RV or that recreational vehicle was sending off a message, I guess, on a loop. They kept saying,
You could hear this message, evacuate the area, that an explosion was about to occur, and that you've likely seen that video play in social media platforms across the internet. And officers, when they got the suspicious vehicle call, they rushed to the scene like any police officer in America does. They run towards the danger to protect their community. And when they got there, they heard that. They took immediate action. They jumped into action. Got the hazardous devices units on the way, and they started working to clear the nearby apartments and clear the streets to make sure that our community could be safe and the folks that were in the city could remain safe in spite of the impending danger that they knew was going to be coming.
You know, Sergeant, so many people around the country, as they focus on this, hopefully will understand the importance of police officers, as if any normal person doesn't already get it. But as they parade around with the defund police, I'd like to throw up pictures of those police officers who responded and, unlike most people, run to the scene of danger as opposed to flee the scene. I believe we have those photos of those police officers who saved lives before that explosion. And our heartfelt thanks, respect, and honor go to them for what they do, not just in this case, but in every case that they handle every day of the year. So God bless them for that. But I do want to go back to now there is a person of interest, I suspect, a suspect now whose name has not been identified, but whose home is being or has been searched today. I imagine that was a very difficult situation, the searching of those premises, deciding whether or not they were booby-trapped and what danger might lie for police officers or hazmat or whoever was going into that facility.
Yeah, certainly anytime you have a situation like this, you got to take certain measures to ensure that not only the officers going in to make those searches, but the community that surrounds the resident or wherever this issue may be that we have to mitigate remains safe. And that's what I'm sure agents did and officers on the scene did. They worked diligently to make sure there were no hazards, and then they went in and began their search to recover evidence that might be linked to this.
All right, it's my understanding that there was no one in that particular location that they had searched?
I'm not familiar as to whether or not there was anybody in the residence, and I know that they're working diligently to collect the evidence for it.
All right, well, let's talk about that. As someone who is involved in local law enforcement, I know there's mutual assistance with state and local law enforcement. But in a case like this that involves an explosion, I suspect that we've got the federal law enforcement, everyone from the FBI, the ATF, and who else is involved in this now?
Yeah, so you're going to have a collaborative effort between local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, and you're going to have folks who are highly trained in explosive devices and investigating issues that relate to it and individuals that may have the cause to do something like this. And so they're being very meticulous, I'm sure, in their searches, looking for anything that may point them in the direction of a device or something that would give them an indicator that the individual that lived at that residence or that owned that RV was responsible. And I'm certain that the agents involved are doing everything they can, all the way from the local level all the way up to the federal level, to make sure that they get this right and they solve this puzzle and they hold the right people accountable.
Before we run out of time, what's most interesting to me is that this individual who was able to create a devastating damage to, as I understand it, 41 businesses, cared enough to send out an alert of an RV that if you can hear this, evacuate the area, warning of the explosion. I'm sure the FBI and their psychological profile unit is trying to assess, what the motive was and what happens in a person
I
like
already
that.
told you, this is nothing but more
What's in their mind.
distractions.
So
Distractions
we'll look
away from
forward
this
to hearing more
election
from you
bullshit and this
federal law
coronavirus
enforcement
bullshit.
system.
More shit
Thank
to
you
keep
so
you
much.
fucking
And
fearful.
more on the national
Stupid.
explosion at the
Y'all
bottom of the hour
motherfuckers so
right
fucking
here
afraid of
with
fucking
Bert
dying,
and
not
Mike.
realizing you're dying right now, asshole.
They
Your
are a
fucking
shameful
future
lot, a motley
and your
crew,
past
parading
is your
around
right
as our
fucking now.
representatives.
Cause
Yet
there's
in
no
truth,
fucking such thing
the
as here today,
epitome of
gone
people
tomorrow.
in it for
Here today,
themselves.
gone
I'm
today.
not the only
Cause ain't
one who
nobody
feels this
promised to
way.
fucking tomorrow.
Congress's approval
Stupid
rating has
ass.
pulled as low as
We all been taught to be
17%
fucking
this year.
stupid asses.
I'm surprised it's
We're the
even that
participants in
high.
our own
Since
slavery.
this
Them sons of
coronavirus
bitches
hit
taught
our
us how to
shores,
believe the
we've
lie
looked
to become
Congress
the
for
liar.
action. Yet
That's
their
lazy.
inaction, their
That
feeble
means you ain't
attempt to
thinking
look like
for
they're
your
going
fucking
to help
self.
us is as transparent
You doing
and
exactly what they
useless
taught you to
as they
fucking do.
are.
Not think.
This week's
Believe,
top, even
dumbass.
Nancy Pelosi,
Understand,
shameless,
dumbass.
I'm rich and you're not
Have
theater.
faith,
As she
dumbass.
goes eating ice cream
And then
in front
hope
of a
that the same motherfuckers that were teaching the same old
refrigerator
bullshit
claiming
was
that
telling you
her
some type of
rolls of
motherfucking truth
$13
when they
a
was
pint
lying all
chocolate ice
along
cream
because they
was
needed all of
helping
us to
her
fucking
deal
lose.
with the
They needed us
pandemic.
willing participants in our
What
own fucking
pandemic?
slavery. How
There's
fucking
no
stupid and
pandemic
lazy
for
is
people
that?
like you, Nancy.
God
You
damn it, that's
constantly
stupid.
violate the rules you pass. The pain and the pleas of working
You're
people
retarded.
fall on deaf ears as you
I ain't
claim
retarded.
to not understand why people are
Can't
against
understand,
lockdown
bitch. You gotta
orders.
realize.
Your cold
Fuck, understand,
response,
have faith,
shelter in
hope,
place,
and believe.
is really
All
the
four
answer?
fucking words made up to keep you
Really?
fucking stupid.
You phony,
We live in a
condescending,
motherfucking world and you need to
fraudulent
know what the fuck you
hypocrite.
doing 24
As
fucking
you,
7.
the
So you
most
need to be
powerful
fucking thinking
elected
about what the
House
fuck you
Democrat,
doing. Shit.
pontificate that
Never
we
fucking
simply
believe in
need to
nothing.
listen to the science. You march through a salon without a mask like a queen, immune from any laws or science. You and your ilk violate your own rules so often, it's clear you believe not only that you are
There go
above
that
the
believe
law,
shit.
but also that the rules serve no purpose other than to suppress and defeat us. While you and California Governor Gavin Newsom shut us down, yet selfishly dine at restaurants so beyond the reach of people you seek to suppress that you're creating an unnecessary class war. Admit it. You don't even believe what you're saying. And by the way, is it even your role to say who should work and who shouldn't? Why can't one store be open, but not another? As Democrats look to crush small business, Target, Costco, Home Depot, and Amazon, and the big box companies, they are all thriving. Small businesses selling the same items are not allowed to open. But you keep saying, listen to the science. What science? Where are the numbers that support the closing of all restaurants in New York, New Jersey, and California when there is only a 0.4% COVID spread? And you keep trying to close schools and get more money for the unions, yet kids rarely get it and they rarely spread it. The teachers who get it from home. Yet you hypocrites allow social distance to disappear.
Our legal system is being ran by a criminal organization,
social justice
and the Democratic
is in your
Party
agenda.
and the Republican Party
Where is
been
the
playing the
small
people
business
like
justice?
puppets for
Where is
decades.
the right to the
They've been
pursuit
having a
of
party on
happiness?
us, people.
Where is the right
It's
of the
time for
little
us to
man
wake the fuck
compete
up
in
from this
this
make-believe
country?
la-la land bullshit.
Why is McDonald's allowed to open, but not my neighborhood burger joint? You say the drive-thru is safe. Tell me about the guy who hands me the French fries through the window. Did he touch his hands to his glasses, his apron, to the person's hands before me? Was the burger cooked on an open grill? Was that man's mask on the whole time? And if he sneezed, did the mask slip off? How long have his gloves been on? Did he
Until
wipe
you
his
realize
hands on his
make-believe
pants
was
or
made
his
up to
apron?
making us
Did he
all into
touch his
being
sleeve,
liars.
the one that he
Look in the
crawled
middle of the
into?
word believe.
Who are
The
you
truth
kidding?
is, the need to
But
know
the one who
is
takes the
the truth
cake
is literally
is Andrea
unbelievable. Why do you believe?
Ocasio-Cortez, who at age
Until you
30
realize
took the
who's
vaccine.
lying to who,
Now I call
you'll
it the
never know
Trump
who you
vaccine.
are.
Funny,
100%.
so many Democrats said
All
they
because we
wouldn't take
all
it
was
if it
taught to
came
be
out of the
fucking
Trump
stupid
administration,
as
yet there
children,
they are,
never to grow up to be
jumping to the head
responsible
of the
adults.
line.
It's
We
time to
don't
start
have enough
thinking more.
vaccines, and there's a
Never
shortage
believe.
of supplies to
It
the
stops
elderly
you
and
from
the
knowing
infirm.
better.
Yet
It
these
stops you from
federal
doing something.
politicians
Believing
consider
sets you up for
themselves
failure
vital
because
and are
make-believe
therefore
was
among
made
the
up to
first to
making us
have
all into
access to
willing
the
participants in our
immunization.
own slavery.
Healthy members of Congress, many of them younger than 40, pushing Americans to the curb as they bully their way to get a vaccine. The same bullies
Our
who
own.
got a paycheck and didn't give a damn about whether you would be getting one. These selfish politicians getting a vaccine before all the healthcare workers who work 15 hours a day, 7 days a week to make sure that we were safe.
Man, fuck that vaccine.
My friend, a doctor, is 73. He spent his life caring for others.
Shit on that
He has a
vaccine.
compromised immune
What you gonna take a
system, and
vaccine
upset of
for?
his T-cell
Looking at,
balance
they're taking the
will prove
vaccine to
fatal
make
to
you
him.
want to take the
He's
vaccine.
not going to get the
Shit,
vaccine for
that's
months.
stupid.
After
Just like the
Congress,
flu
essential
shot.
workers,
What the fuck
which
you look
includes
like
the garbage
getting the
collectors
flu
and the truckers.
instead of catching the
He
flu
is
naturally?
hoping,
You
and
getting
his
the
family
flu
is
through a
hoping
fucking
he
needle
can
into your
hang on
fucking
long
arm,
enough
stupid.
to get it.
And when you get sick from
Now, I
getting the
have an
flu
idea,
by getting a
AOC.
shot
You're
to
the
get
one
the
who
flu,
talks the big
you
talk
can't
about
sue nobody
equality,
if you get sick
minority
or you die
justice,
from
and
it. You're
injustice.
stupid
You should be
to
the
fucking
last in line to
believe
get the vaccine.
anything.
You guys
You're
did
stupid
nothing for the
to
last
trust
6 months
in
but play
these
politics in the
assholes,
run-up to the
elite
presidential
motherfucking
election. Why weren't you guys protesting
population
with
control
small
wanting
business
people dead
owners who
motherfuckers.
know in their hearts that they will not survive another shutdown, who know there's no one fighting for them? You don't have to be a genius to know that if lockdowns actually work, they wouldn't have to keep locking us down. And you, who anoint yourself the savior of the downtrodden, have you even been trying to get money to Americans? A simple, straight bill, you condescending, patronizing...
A lot of so-called doctors need to be fired after this. A lot of doctors should be sued after this. But if we had a legal system that was about justice, someone would be sued about this here. But our legal system is being ran by a criminal organization. All of these motherfuckers are criminals on the TV. All they do is tell lies to our vision, programming us all to be stupid to their bullshit. But enough is a fucking enough.
America, you're disgusting. You're an embarrassment to the people's house. And now for the big screwing. How do you justify taking money from America to give to foreign countries and special interests during a pandemic? As we come upon the end of tenor protections, this December 31, with the inability to work, the inability to get a vaccine, and you arrogant, selfish politicians think that $600 is enough.
When you lay up there and take the vaccine, you need to go do your research.
You work in the House of Representatives. It is the people's house. It was built for those who are closest to the people. You work for us. We pay your salary, your staff, for your travel, for your junkets. You spend our money, not yours. And you prefer to spend it now on third world countries while we're in a pandemic?
These motherfuckers spent $38 million on investigating Donald Trump. And now we're going to allow these criminals to get back in power? How fucking stupid are we as people?
Philippine students don't play hooky? If you can't afford to take care of Americans, but you can take care of other countries and special projects of lobbyists, then we can't afford to have you in the people's house. You've proven that you're disloyal, that your health and your salaries are more important than the people who put you in power, naively. You're a disdain for the people you represent.
The Democrat rats and the Republican clowns been playing the fucking people for fucking decades. When we realize...
Let me know what you think on my Facebook and Twitter. Hashtag Judge Jeanine. If you like my opens, you're going to love my new book, Don't Lie to Me. It's available for order at all bookstores and at JudgeJeanine.store.
It's time to stand up to
Herschel
the
Walker
bullshit
and
that don't
David
make
Hunt
sense.
are still on deck tonight, but next, Senior advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign, Corey Lewandowski, joins me live to discuss my open and whether struggling Americans can get some relief from Washington this week.
England. American football can only be played in America.
Welcome back to Justice. Now, you just heard my open. Congress is letting down America once again at one of our most critical times in recent memory. So, is there any hope for Americans struggling with
there is no justice.
closed businesses?
Our legal system ain't shit. Our legal system is being ran by a criminal organization. Until we the people clean up our legal system, the police gonna do what they do, and the elite assholes gonna do what they do, and they gonna get away with it too. When you look at the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, both parties been having a party on people for decades. They've been saying they're gonna do one thing, and then they do another. They never do what they say they're gonna do. They always lying to us, the people, and we pay their salaries. How fucking stuck and stupid are we, the fucking people? I mean, we the sheep. All believers are stupid.
We got nothing. We got a measly $600.
Liars, and don't even know.
The president is fighting to give the American people more money, and Congress won't do it.
Well, you know what? It's frightening. And, I was going to say we get cold, but you know what? They're going to try to stop fracking and everything else. I mean, it's a nightmare for this country. But let's move on from there. Let's talk about not the way the House treats the American people and members of the House, but also about how the House itself is handling, things like attacking the president, how they've done in the year 2020 as it relates to other countries, and the outright hypocrisy.
I've been poisoned by this gangrene contrast, and I've been poisoned by the coronavirus, and been sent home to die with all the bullshit. But one thing about the truth that I know, and you should know too, the natural order of thinking with the wisdom of the creator of you being here. You're not going nowhere until it's time.
But what we know is this: the FBI provided a defensive.
But one thing about that is someone can rush your time, especially a practice physician, LLC. Limited liability coverage, meaning the doctors can kill you and me, and they're covered by who? I'm glad you asked. They're covered by their legal
every member of the Intelligence Committee. And the scariest thing about all this, Judge, is Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff knew about this before they appointed
who become judges.
To this committee. He refuses to answer questions, and when
these are the people who are running everything.
The president
a criminal organization. When are we the people going to start our own legal law firm for the people, by the people, ran by people that the people can trust, because we can no longer trust the system of justice. No longer.
This is remarkable.
It needs to be investigated. People need to go to jail or be fired.
Well, the amazing part of it is that there doesn't seem to be any pushback. And this is where, Corey, I'm reminded of big tech, the mainstream media, and the Democrats who all joined together to try to prevent Donald Trump's re-election. And we're seeing it again. Whenever the Democrats do something that is so beyond the pale of the same things that they've accused the president of that he's never done, they get away with it. And it's a frightening time, I must tell you, in American history.
Judge, look at the Hunter Biden story. When the New York Post broke it, the fourth largest newspaper in America, the major internet outlets.
This is bullshit. When you look at the legal system being ran by a criminal organization, we don't have no judges that's going to help us. The judges have been compromised. The whole system has been compromised. We the people need to stand up and shut the system down. Fuck the bullshit. We the people own the fucking system. Meaning, the fucking Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines are all for the fucking people, not against the people. These are not the elite assholes puppets. This is the reason why the soldiers are killing themselves, because they know that they're fucking with their emotions and their morals. Come on, people, we're not this stupid. These elite assholes need to be put in jail, because like I said before, There's no statute of limitation on murder.
Corey, let me ask you this. Look, you know, I love you. We've been friends for years. I'm so sick and tired of special counsels. I watched Jeff Sessions. I watched Bill Barr. Went through 4 years, and the American people understand this. They know in the depths of their heart when something is a crime and when something should be prosecuted. No one's been prosecuted. Comey, McCabe, Strzok, none of them. Hillary Clinton, none of them, for the obvious violations of law. So when we talk about this, I think the American people are starting to say there is no justice. There's a two-tiered system of justice in America. If you're at the top, you get away with it. If you're at the top of Congress, you get the vaccine, you get money. All the things that are inconsistent with America as that city on the hill is just, it's gone.
Judge, you're not wrong, and that's a big part of the reason Donald Trump was sent to Washington, D.C., and the people that he has supported, who continue to support him, have a voice now in Washington. But you're absolutely right. We have seen all of those people who lied under oath, specifically Andy McCabe, never charged. The Justice Department has been broken, and that's what I'm so concerned about. Hunter Biden will get a pass under the Justice Department, and you mark my words, Judge, those people who supported Donald Trump in the 2020 election, they will be attacked because of that support. You mark my words tonight. If Joe Biden is the president of the United States, he will use the Justice Department like Barack Obama did to go after some of those nonprofits that support conservative causes, some of those nonprofits that support the issue of right to life, and those people who supported Donald Trump. You mark my words, it's coming.
Well, you know, when there's a vendetta behind the Department of Justice, you know, it is everything other than what our founding fathers intended. Corey Lewandowski, always good to see you. Happy New Year, my friend. Anyway, the Commander-in-Chief still working to bring home American troops and end the so-called endless wars in the Middle East. I'm talking about that and more next with Colonel David Hunt.
Good evening and live from America's News Headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. COVID-19 cases now topping 80 million worldwide, with the U.S. by far the world leader. Data from Johns Hopkins University shows the U.S. with nearly 18.5 million confirmed cases. Second behind the U.S. is India with 10.2 million. More than 330,000 Americans have died from the virus. Worldwide, the death toll is up to 1.75 million. Meanwhile, health officials in Canada confirming the first 2 cases of a new form of COVID-19 that was first identified in the United Kingdom. New virus restrictions have gone into effect in the UK to try to halt this new variant. It's believed to spread more quickly than other strains. 24 million people are now in the UK's top level of restrictions. I'm Jackie Ibanez. Now back to Justice with Judge Jeanine. For all of your headlines, you can log on to foxnews.com.
All right, welcome back to Justice. President Trump has been at the helm for 4 years, and the U.S. military has seen some real positives. Now the Commander-in-Chief is continuing to work to bring home troops stationed overseas. Joining me now to discuss that and more is co-author of the book, Without Regret, Colonel David Hunt. Colonel, belated Merry Christmas. Good to see you. You know, I think it's been an interesting 4 years. Nobody really knew what to expect from President Donald J. Trump. But I think you, as someone who was in the military for 30 years, how long?
Yeah, Judge, 30 years.
Yeah, you always downplay it. You don't want to talk about your medals. You don't want to talk about anything. I always like to talk about that. But in any event, it seems that Donald Trump is giving a Christmas present to military families in the United States. Explain to the viewers what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been at war in Afghanistan for 19 years and in Iraq for 17. We've lost thousands of American soldiers, tens of thousands wounded.